And so I know we are at 3 p.m. on the dot. So I know there'll still be people coming in, so feel free to drop your name, your title, and your district in the chat. You can also add any questions you may have for our panelists today in the Q&A, and we will save some time at the end to talk through any questions, answer as many questions as we can. So my name is Stephanie Guillory. I am here with Everyday Labs, and I'm here with two of our partners from Sacramento City Unified School District, Jennifer Crutchman and Nikki Kangas. And so they are here to tell us all about the great strategies they've been using to address the attendance gap and then help student outcomes within their district as well. So I think without further ado, I will pass it over to our experts today.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Crutchman, and I am the Director of MTSS, Student Attendance and Engagement at Sac City. That's Sacramento, California.
Hey everyone, welcome and thanks for being here with us today. I'm Nikki Kangas and I am our Community Engagement Manager for our Communications Office.
Thank you, Nikki. You're awesome. So next slide, please.
Oh, that's us. We can go to the next one.
There we go. And this is well, it's a couple things actually. It's our agenda or our journey for today. And on the right is our lovely, that's our MTSS tree. So it's something that we created in partnership with basically all of the departments at our district to symbolize the work that we're doing. And we did that in about 2021. So we're in the middle of the pandemic. But today, what we're talking about is Sac City. So Nikki will give you a little recap on what we look like by the numbers. And then we want to look at what happened during COVID. I mean, we all know what happened, but how our district reacted and what we did in the midst of that crisis or the ongoing crisis. What did the data show us? And then how did we ultimately triumph at that time? We also had a big transition. Our old campaign was Be Here. And obviously with COVID, you could no longer be there or be here in class. And so we learned a lot. And one of the things that we learned was that we had to transition and change our focus. And so we were then called the CARE team. And I'll expand on that in a little bit. We'll also talk about community engagement and all of the wonderful work that Nikki has been doing this past year that has really kind of changed the perspective of our district. And we've had a lot of challenges, but what she does is a bright, shiny light in our world. And then we'll wrap up with talking about how we hope to and are striving to make attendance more equitable across the board. So next slide, please.
Thanks, Jennifer. So going into who are we? What do our kids look like? We serve about 40,000 students. We do, like every district across California, have declining enrollment going on, but we serve a very diverse population of students. As most of you probably know, Sacramento is one of the most diverse communities in the world. So our demographics of our student body also reflect that. We serve about 40% Latinx students, 18% Asian, 17% white, 13% African American, and 7% identifying as 2 or more races. We have 51 languages that are being spoken at home. And on top of all of that, I think it's the 13th largest school district in the country. We have 70% of our students classified as low income, foster, or experiencing homeless. So we have a lot of communications challenges in our district that were completely exposed during COVID and all of the communications needs that we had at that time. Next slide, I'll turn it back to Jen.
Thanks so much, Nikki. So, flashback, it's March 2020, and I couldn't believe it, but on Wednesday, people started talking about actually shutting the doors. And by Friday, 2 days, we closed our doors to all of our students, just like all of you, at some point in time in March, and tried to figure out what in the world we were going to do from here. It took us a little while. We have a lot of challenges in our district, and one of those is negotiations. And so we ended up starting back up with distance learning in a concurrent model that was unilaterally implemented. So there was a lot of resistance to basically all things at that time. Rather than uniting as a district, we kind of, the gap grew wider for us as well. What we realized when we first went back to school is that there were about a little less than 2,000 kids that we were unable to locate. And that meant, for us anyways, that either we had one or two points of contact, but they had never logged in after the first week of school, or we had just never heard from them since that last Friday in March. And at this point in time, it was a little scary, and ADA became, or attendance rates, average daily attendance, was no longer our focus. Our student safety was our focus. And so we had to redo how we looked at attendance altogether. We had students logging in from home, engaging and participating rather than attending. And so we created an weekly engagement survey, a daily engagement survey that students would fill out. And it actually started with, how are you feeling? Do you need anything? So very clearly, our focus went from, are you doing your schoolwork and sitting at a desk, to how can we help you? We actually had district staff and principals driving around in vans, distributing lunches, food, books, whatever we could do to some of our neediest communities, because we knew that many of our students relied on school. That was their hub. That was where they had breakfast. That's where they had lunch, sometimes dinner even. That was their safe place for many, many families. So locating these nearly 2,000 students became our priority. My goal for our team in student attendance at that time, just attendance, was to find 100% of those students. It wasn't okay to lose any of them. And so we did. We got to work. And by the end of May, we had made a pretty big dent through something that I called, and this is really, really amazing, it's magic, outreach. So phone calls, Facebook, Instagram, knocking on doors, home visits, we actually called them porch visits at that time, were our key to locating families. When we didn't have a good address or phone number or emergency contact, which we also realized during this time period, we were missing a ton of data. We partnered with Everyday Labs, and they changed all of what they did around attendance and created a survey for us that actually was sent out, email, two-way text, post on a website, hard copy mail, that asked for all of their contact information. And we were able to locate, another few hundred kids just by changing the way we worked and communicated with Everyday Labs, going from attendance to, how can we find you now? Fast forward, it's the end of June, and we still hadn't found all of our students at this point in time. And we knew we had to really get at it. And so we literally hit the streets and were knocking on doors in masses. There were large groups from school sites partnered with our team looking for students. And oftentimes we would stumble into a community, an apartment complex, where there was a large population We have like Marshallese families here from the Marshall Islands, and they tend to live in their communities, and we would locate sometimes up to 50 students at one time just by doing this extensive outreach, knocking on doors, and finding these kids. One of the things that we realized is that contact information was essential, and so we have changed, and we now ask for contact information on an ongoing basis. We have an online portal where families can update their phone numbers, update their address regularly. And there's a lot of things that seem simple, right? The emergency card process had to change all of that too. Lots of learning happened during this time, but I can say by the end of that summer, going into the next school year, we had found all but 6 of our students. And my hope is those 6 students moved out of state and we were just completely unable to find them, and everyone was safe and sound. So it took a lot of work, but we did learn and we did adapt. Next slide. But this was very different than our normal approach, because our district, because it is so large and it is an urban school district, there wasn't a lot of home visits going on. There wasn't a lot of this really interpersonal connection from the district office. Our school sites were close with our families, but the district were this big entity in the center of the town, and we kind of operate at a distance. So what we did is we just kept it really simple. And at that same time, we learned that MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, was not only a good strategy, a good framework, it was essential to do everything that we were doing. What we did learn at this point in time is the disproportionality between our haves and our have-nots. So our students of color, our students who were struggling to get by financially, and their families, that achievement gap just widened for them. And our students at our from our more affluent families, they were doing, about the same and sometimes better. And I say sometimes better because I watched their attendance improve, and I watched as their grades improved as well. They now had one-on-one time, usually with an adult, their parent, who was working with them at home or in small little homework groups, where other families that maybe didn't have those luxuries were unable to even log in on a daily basis. Maybe they only had one Chromebook per household, which we also changed to. By the end of that summer, it was a 1-to-1 ratio for all of our students. That took a ton of work, but it was really devastating to see the numbers, and the data doesn't lie. That achievement gap, that gap between the haves and the have-nots, got bigger and bigger over the last 2 or 3 years, and that's what we're all facing now. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is where we're starting to look at the data, and some of you may be familiar with this, but this actually comes from Everyday Labs as well. It is Everyday Data Insights, I think is what it's called, through Tableau. And it is the best, the most accurate, clearest, easiest to use, and the most widely used data system in our district right now. You can look at pre-COVID, we had a chronic absence rate of 11.9% in March, which was actually really good. We had been usually up around 18%, so we had reduced pretty drastically, but that was with some intensive work. I started here in 2017 because we had a Prop 47 grant to address chronic absence, and so we had made huge strides, and then bam, the pandemic hit, and you can see this year we're at 35.6% chronic absence rate. So nearly 40% of our kids are missing so much school, they're less likely to graduate, right? There's a lot of things that attendance can predict. Poor attendance can predict, and they're not positive. I can say last year with distance learning, we were working really, really, really hard, and we had everyone was kind of on board and syncing together, and our chronic absence rate hovered at right about 20%. So last year, I was so proud of the work my team was doing because they really put in all effort, and we did it. And then this year, Omicron, we also had a strike. All sorts of things happened in our district that were just fighting against improving attendance and getting kids to school. And so basically, we're at a place now where we're at almost 40% of our kids chronically absent. It's almost June. We missed 8 days for a strike in April. And that's 8 days of the actual strike. But weeks before is when the tension and things started changing. So not a lot of, teaching and learning was happening at that point in time. So that gap, now no fault of the kids again, now it's on the adults, is further widening. And this is where we are. So almost 40% chronic absence, and it breaks my heart, but that's where we are. So next slide, please. Okay, so this slide makes me happy. When we got our COVID dollars, as everyone calls it, we realized that we weren't just going to invest in more attendant staff. We had to completely change how we did our work. It went from monitoring data, truancy, SARBs, this punitive approach to getting kids to school or else, to it's all about relationships. Our students and school sites that had good, positive, strong relationships between the adults, between the students and the community, their attendance rates were high. They were thriving. They knew when their kids were in trouble, and they would reach out and get help. At our sites where the relationships were tense or sometimes none at all, you can see it in the numbers. It reflected very easily that these families were not connecting with their school site. So we changed from be here to care. Connect, ask, relate, engage. It's kind of cheesy, but I love it. We started working really closely with a lot of our partners. Attendance Works, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Cecilia and Hetty are absolutely amazing. We have followed their suggestions, their resources, everything that they have done since we started. And without them, I have no idea where we'd be. Everyday Labs, another amazing partner who was with us side by side the entire time, and still to this day. Kelvin is another great resource. It is a survey tool, and I can tell you a little bit more about that as we get further along, but it basically can measure SEL. So it is a data set that we often don't have data. When we have kiddos who are doing well in all areas, but their grades are suffering or their attendance is suffering, but all the other areas are fine, sometimes this SEL data, that student well-being data, that will give us insight as to what's going on with that kiddo. So their tool has been really great. We work super closely with our county offices, Department of Human Assistance. They help us with housing, SARBs, contact information. We have an MOU with them, and we're also the basically parent-teacher home visits, if you're familiar with. They started here in Sacramento, and so that's another great Tier 1, and we'll get to that MTSS stuff soon, Tier 1 resource intervention. So we have a new vision statement, and our goal now is to connect with our students, our families, and all of our people. Next slide, please. So just to expand a little bit more on our partnerships, during distance learning, it was really difficult. And this year, so let me expand. And this year, it's really difficult to talk about attendance. It's hard to send a letter home saying, your student has been absent 10 days because we sent them home, right? They're quarantined. So we've had to do a lot of adjusting, and Everyday Labs was right there with us, providing resources, ideas. If things didn't work, adjusting it. Two-way texting is amazing. It helps establish what our families are wanting and needing, because they can text back and say, I need support in, and let us know. It actually helped us create our learn.seusd.edu website. That was the central website for all resources during the pandemic. And without this data, it wouldn't exist. Attendance works. So Cecilia basically was right there with us in the trenches, and also with Everyday Labs in the trenches, helping us still continue to conduct our AIM meeting, which is our attendance improvement movement. It's a peer learning network that meets every other month. We've done it the past 2 years. We had 150 people at our peak, and we average about 75 people regularly at every meeting, and it's huge, and people are inspired. And again, attendance works idea and support. So next slide, please. This pretty slide, the art has nothing to do with it, but it's basically, this is the core of our work. It is very similar to what MTSS would call their main drivers or their core components. One, we had to create a culture of attendance and engagement. So that meant that the superintendent, the chief academic officer, the principals, anyone engaged at the school or at the district office had to understand that attendance was important. It was no longer just, are you there or not? It had to be conveyed to our families that not only do we want your children to attend, it's expected that they attend so they can succeed, because we want to be there for them. Capacity building. We never skipped a beat. So from the beginning in March, we have had our quarterly trainings, trainings on independent study, trainings on our toolkit. Whatever we could teach, we did. Third, this is a teams-based approach, teams leadership approach. So we have MTSS attendance teams at every site and at the district office. It's super important because that district level MTSS team can sift out and figure out the problems that are occurring at the sites with their input and their feedback, and we can fix a system rather than put out fires, right? MTSS, multi-tiered system of support, tiered re-engagement. So this is district-wide implementation. It just so happened we started in 2020, right, with our first cohort of schools. And we had already been doing this work in our office for attendance. Now we were going district-wide with all things academics, behavior, social, emotional, and attendance. It was really important that we followed that MTSS framework because it works, period. It works. And then this is a really compelling piece that I suggest, if you have the capacity to do so, get that youth voice involved. We have a group of students, secondary students, who were either previously chronically absent or are currently chronically absent, that work to educate their peers and be the face of the CARE campaign. So they will table events. They had created an entire social media stream that really focused on getting their peers to school. And they created and learned at the same time marketing, graphic design, animation. And so it's a win-win. And no teenagers, I have a 16-year-old daughter, listen to me, but they do listen to their peers. And during this time, they were struggling. Um, we had George Floyd, we had Breonna Taylor, all sorts of social justice things going on. We had the pandemic and fear and anxiety. Then this year we had a strike, which was toxic at our school sites. We had data from that Kelvin tool that I told you about that showed our students in the month before the strike in March compared to the next time they took that pulse, their emotional safety in general decreased by 6 percentage points. That was huge. No other areas declined or improved that much ever this year. They also had a decline of nearly 4% in adult relationships. And this is a survey that is answered by nearly half of our 40,000 students. So that data is accurate and it's lovely data, but it shows that our kids are struggling, just struggling getting to school. It feels like it's optional this year. So hopefully with their peers being the ones leading the way, they will follow. Next slide, please. Okay, let me take a drink of water because my mouth is getting dry. And I promise Nikki is going to talk. She has a lot to say soon, but I'll be quick. We created a care.scusd.edu website. I love it. We worked with a local ad agency, and they created a simple, streamlined website full of resources around MTSS and student attendance and engagement. In our multi-tiered system of support, we all know our triangle, right? We can fill that triangle with all sorts of fluff, right? All sorts of referrals and service referrals and nice things that we can do. But we needed to get down to the bare bones, the systems that are working at our school sites. So we created a couple things. One is our absence process. It's even been updated since this slide, but it tells you what will happen at every absence level at every site. I would love to say without fail. It's not without fail, but it is. It will happen soon. If it hasn't happened at the 5th absence that you've gotten your letter of support, you'll get it by the 6th. So our school sites have been trained. Our families get a copy of this absence process. This is that communication piece, that culture of attendance that I was talking about from the previous slide. We created this template for our pyramid, our MTSS pyramid that has our foundation, and it's fillable. So our attendance teams that are created at each site and supported by a child welfare and attendance specialist from the district, they sit down at the beginning of the year and they do their resource mapping. They determine what interventions they have, what curriculums they have, and what they can do for their tier 1, right? That's impacting all students at the school. And then there are other tiers. So for our tier 1, we have a beautiful newsletter that now goes out twice a month that is created in part by that source media team. So those kids are the ones creating that newsletter that goes to the superintendent of schools and across the state, actually, to all sorts of districts. We really changed to having a welcoming environment at all school sites. We really wanted to have, we wanted to make sure that we had all current contact information for our students and families in case anything happened. We never thought it would happen, and so now we know it can happen again. And by all means, we are going to have a phone number where we can reach someone. So we have trained all staff so that every time they do an outreach phone call, they verify the address, the phone number, the emergency contacts every time, and they document every time. So this clear, concise standardization of practices is essential to getting off the ground. And these things, these templates, we'll have in a folder for you to access at the end of the webinar. Next slide, please. This is Nikki.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about how communications and community engagement can help to support that welcoming environment that Jennifer is speaking to, because part of welcoming, making our students feel included, is making sure their families also understand what's going on and can engage in their children's education. As I mentioned previously with the demographic of our district, we serve students speaking 51 languages and all types of different cultural backgrounds. And so one of the things that the pandemic really exposed for us is that we were not reaching all of those families with our emails and business as usual communications. And that was part of the challenge that we were facing in trying to make sure we had all that updated contact information, not to mention making sure that families are getting consistent, clear messages from their district and being kept up to date on what's going on, especially in crisis. So given that we saw that there was this really great need, we did hire on. We have a Spanish, Hmong, Vietnamese, Chinese, and Farsi translator all on staff now. And in addition, we partner with third-party companies that provide translation services to fill gaps where needed. So, you know, the Farsi translator that we hired on staff, that happened after we saw a huge influx of Afghanistan refugees coming into our district. Similarly, right now we're seeing an influx in new Ukrainian students entering into our district. So as resources, you know, are being allocated, we're making sure that we're able to reach those families, especially with our most urgent and critical communications. If not with every single message. We also have a translation feature on our website that's been really key. But of course, not every family is reachable by email. Like I said, we also serve a huge population of low-income students, and we've gotten feedback that not all of our emails are getting to them, or maybe they don't have an email address, they don't have a computer to log onto. So it's a huge challenge. And that's why, in addition to just sending out digital communications, we're really diligent to be sure that we're also texting our families, calling them, sending flyers home and using the backpack method. And we're able to, as part of our contact records for our students, make sure that we know what that home language is on file so that we can version communications to each school site that need to go into those backpacks and make sure that the right language version of a flyer, for example, is getting sent home to that student. Next slide. And then with the community engagement side of the work that we're doing, and as it relates to MTSS and attendance, is that, you know, the pandemic really fractured our community, for lack of better wording. It's so sad, and it's palpable to see it in the way that as families came back together in the school environment, there didn't feel like there was that sense of connection and community that we used to have before all of us had to stay home for so long. So what we're trying to do as part of our attendance strategy, rebounding from the pandemic and the data that Jennifer was sharing, is to establish our school sites as a place that not just our students, but our community partners and our families and staff, elected officials, all can come together to feel a sense of pride in their school community. And what we think that this translates to, and are continuing to measure, is that when families feel like the school walls also include them, not just their student, not just the teachers, but they're an active part of their students' educational experience, they're more likely to engage on an ongoing basis, and their kids are more likely to attend school. So the way that we bring them together, it's obviously not, hey, let's have, talk about attendance, because that's not as exciting for kiddos. So we're bringing really robust entertainment, activities. Resources are super important, and I'll get into that a little bit more in just a second. And then student participation, so student-led art, performance. photography, etc., are part of our ongoing strategy to really get kids excited to come to these events and share with their peers and their families what they've been doing. The way that we are kind of locating where we set these up within our district, because we serve about 75 schools, and some of the areas are more affluent, some are more in greater need of access to these resources. So we're really focusing in areas where we know that we have higher rates of chronic absence in those school communities. And we're trying to minimize transportation barriers because we want to make sure that the people who need those resources most, like free food is a big one, are able to get to us, and that we're coming to where they are so that we can really help support them and create that support network. And then in addition, we want to make sure that we're providing culturally relevant education as well as entertainment. So when we're looking at motivational speakers or mentorship programs or other kinds of activations that we're incorporating into these events, we're really trying to think about, well, what is the demographic of this area? As an example, if we're in South Sacramento doing an event, they have a huge Hmong population there. Can we bring in a Hmong dance group or something that's really going to speak to those families and make them feel included and celebrated? Next slide. So these are just some little happy scenes from the last fair that we had. So our first really big fair was May 21st. It was in our South Sacramento area. And we're very proud that we had at least 1,000 people come and just attend the event. It was so packed, and we had a line out the door literally to come in and get meal tickets and everything, like the entire event. It was so much fun. We had bounce houses. We served free tacos out of our central kitchen, which is our nutrition services food truck, and is really innovative because it provides freshly prepared meals from scratch to our families. We also fixed over 90 bicycles. We had free bike repairs on site, which is huge for families that maybe the barrier to getting their kid to school is transportation, and maybe that family only has bicycles to get their kids to school. And so being able to make sure that we keep those bikes and wheels on the road is really key in helping support attendance too. You can see in the middle top photo, that's actually Jennifer's team. They were tabling on site to talk about the attendance processes and resources that we offer our families. In addition, you can see there's our LGBT center, but we had so many community partners. So we weren't just providing school-related resources, but also other resources that our families may need, and fun merch and other things that they could take home with them that maybe they needed. The Sacramento Kings came out, our basketball team, and kiddos were so excited to get all these free t-shirts and hats, and just we saw so many smiles light up that day, and it was really beautiful to see the community come back together in this way around a school site after everything that our district and all of our school communities throughout the United States have been through. I think that's all I really have to say about that. But I think as we think about our attendance and engagement strategies, it's important to remember that positioning our school sites as a fun and inclusive place to be is really key. Next slide. That's back to Jennifer.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nikki. And I just want to add that Nikki came on in the midst of all of this without a chief in communications, without anyone else, and was running our communications department during COVID. She did a splendid job, and she's doing an even more amazing job with these community fairs. I'm so excited. We're actually going to partner with her and another school district. So one of our local school districts, we share a ton of families, and it's in one of our lowest income area in South Sac. And we are going to host 2 community events, one at their school, one at ours. And it will be in September during Attendance Awareness Month. So that campaign that I talked about earlier from Attendance Works will be featured there. And we're not just going to talk about attendance and be boring. We're going to do all the same fun things that she was talking about, and have, I think there was something like Break Late Fix stuff, and Walk Sacramento will be there. Just, it's really, really exciting. But one of the things that we are able to use, you'll see on this slide in the middle, that's a heat map. And so that map, basically, it comes from our Everyday Labs data tool. It tells us where we have the highest rates of chronic absenteeism. And so we can literally schedule our community events where we see red spots, all over the map. It also is used by us and the Student Attendance and Engagement Office. So we've got 6 child welfare and attendance specialists that support all 75 school sites. And one of the things they do for our Tier 2 interventions are our summer connection home visits. So we use this map. We use data from last year to look at students who were chronically absent last year. We also look at data from the previous 2 years to see if it's a pandemic thing or if it's a true outside barrier and they struggled even prior to COVID to get to school. And we do summer connection home visits from our district office where we go to the home and we talk to the families, we meet them, we make sure they have everything they need to start school, we make sure they have everything they need to understand that it's dire that their kiddos get to school. This year we do home visits and we literally have families say, I just decided to keep my kids home this year. And we're like, oh, okay. And 7-year-olds that haven't started kindergarten. So there's a lot of disconnect. And so these connection home visits help us start the school year on the right foot, right? Intervening before we have the opportunity for it to become a crisis. You can see on the right-hand side, we have little care door hangers so that they know that we came by if they're not home. We've added a feature there that's a QR code that if they scan it, it will take them to resources and a survey where they can respond and let us know what they need and why they were absent. Our other Tier 2 interventions, of course, are our nudge letters that come from Everyday Labs, and so that's Tier 1, Tier 2, depending on what the letter is. But we have been spread thin on all levels the past 3 years, and being able to connect with 40,000 students at a time or 7,000 students if we're just working on our chronically absent students is something we couldn't have done without Everyday Labs and their letters. And so what was really great about them these past 2 years, I wanted to talk about attendance and point fingers as little as possible, but still convey the message that we care and we want your kiddos at school. And they were able to do that. The other piece about our Tier 2 is that these home visits are not just for summer, they are all year round. I would say home visits are our best practice, best intervention, best way to have long-term results and relationships with families. And I think a home visit, if we weren't able to catch it on the front side, a home visit is the best way to catch it on the back side. And so we have our engagement support plans are often done during our home visits. So if we have a family that doesn't show up to their scheduled meeting when they've reached that threshold of 6 or more absences, we can do it at their house. So next slide. Okay, and these are just a very small example of some of the interventions that we do when we get to Tier 3. We really want to have at Tier 3, when our students are missing this much school, it's 80%, so their attendance rate is 80% or less. If they are there, we are intervening at the highest, most individualized level possible. It will often mean referrals for mental health or wellness for either the individual or the family. Sometimes it's housing or domestic violence support, foster youth support. One thing that we've done is we have, if you're not familiar with SARB, Student Attendance Review Board, or I'm sorry, School Attendance Review Board, one or the other. It used to be very punitive, where literally uniformed officers and all CPS and all sorts of people sat in a circle and attempted to tell a family that they're going to be on contract. You need to get your kids to school and tell us, a little bit about yourself. Too bad, let's sign the contract, move on. Very, very punitive. It was awful. You could see the anxiety in our families. You could see the fear in the kids when they would bring the kids. It was unsettling that these practices are still happening. But what we were able to do is we created a restorative SARB. And so basically we're using restorative practices and the restorative questions. We meet with the family before the SARB. We have a case manager, Monica, who goes out, connects, and basically is their advocate, right? And we have seen improvements already. And we didn't have our first SARB until I think it was April. So since April, this restorative SARB practice has already improved the attendance and hopefully the grades and success rates of a number of students in our school or in our school district. So it's something that I'm really proud of. O'Neill runs our SARBs and he does an amazing job. And so I think it's something that if you look at the data, see if things like truancy court and SARB are working, really look at the data, because I think you'll find that it's not for the most part, at least in our district, and try something new. And this is a great way to usher into our next slide, please, which this is our wrap-up question. How do we make attendance more equitable? And so I'll just start and I'll share this with Nikki, but basically we're using MTSS for everything. That's our framework. It's how we do business. We use data. If it's working, we keep it. If it's not working, we don't. Every student fits in our MTSS framework. It serves each and every student, not just special student groups. We really want to provide what everyone needs. And then next, this one is about the data. And so it's taken, 4 or 5 years since I've been here to get the interactive data that I wanted. And it is being used now as much as it possibly can to create SIPSA goals, to create LCAP goals. And it works for our attendance teams. They actually know the numbers, they look at the data, and they help the kids. Seems pretty simple, but there you have it. And Nikki?
Yeah, then we're using the same data again in summary to look at where we have these higher rates of chronic absenteeism in low-income families that we're trying to serve, so that we can strategically decide where and how often we are providing community resources and helping to foster connective relationships in those communities to improve school climate, not just for our students, but for all of our community and families.
Awesome. Okay, next slide. And there you have it. I think we're actually a little early. Is that possible? I don't know. Basically, we have a Google folder that has access to all of the resources that we have that we're sharing, our toolkit, our absence process, our letters. If there's anything else you'd like, we can throw it in there as well. There's a link to the Attendance Works Attendance Awareness Month campaign. I think it's important. The more people involved, the more, let's make this a nationwide thing. Like September, go to school. If we start the school year that way, we've built a habit. It's been 3 weeks. Blam, done. Visit our website. It gives all sorts of information. Give us feedback. We have so much room to grow. We are at the beginning and we're actually changing everything, right? So it's not just getting better. We're starting over and getting better. one piece that I wanted to just kind of end on is another thing that we've realized is that attendance is about safety too. So when kids aren't in school, other things are going on. In the past few weeks, there's been a lot happening with the mass shootings, but also with students committing suicide in our district. It weighs on me because I think if we had started these interventions early, right? So all of our kiddos in elementary school had an intervention the second that we noticed that there was the opportunity for them to slip, right? For them to go into being chronically absent. If we had intervened then and done assessments and been consistent and provided the mental health support and provided whatever it was that they needed at that time or that family needed at that time, things might look different. And it's not just attendance work. We're not just office staff. We're not just checking a box. We're supporting people and families. And so I think we can end there. And Stephanie, I guess we'll be moving into Q&A if there are any. And thank you, Nikki, for being amazing as always, too.
I just want to quickly add, too, that I think, as Jennifer mentioned, all of us are trying to adapt to this new world and figure out how to improve attendance outcomes and make it more equitable across all of our systems, not just SCUSD. So if any of you that are here on this call or watching this video later want to reach out to me and connect and just collaborate, brainstorm how we can do things better or pick each other's brains for resources, Jennifer and I are here for all of you too.
Thank you so much, Jennifer and Nikki. It was great to hear about all the different things you've been doing this year. You guys have been very busy. Like I know many people on the webinar today. So I will see if there's any questions here, and feel free, everyone. We have a good 8 minutes to answer any questions you may have. A question I have, I know, for me, if you were to ask me, like probably the highlight for a lot of the students was that bouncy castle, because I just really love bouncy castle. But when you think back on the school year, there's been some highs and lows. What were some of like your favorite bright spots or like teachable moments in your attendance work this year?
Well, one thing that we did that was actually a super surprising, well, not super surprising, but it worked. We connected with a local motivational speaker. He is a man of color. He overcame a lot of adversity, and we had him speak at, I think, the top 10 highest chronic absence rate schools back in September and October. I think we had to push it to October because of COVID. After that, we asked if he might be willing to do something called Greatness Squad, is what he's named it. But we just asked if he would go back to those school sites and meet with kiddos, males of minority descent. It's like, it didn't really matter as long as their chronic absence rate was 8% or higher. So they would meet on a weekly basis and have small group discussions about what was happening at school, maybe what was happening in their life. And it was kind of a mentorship, but it wasn't the one-on-one. It was small group mentorship. We collected that data and used MTSS and watched 96% of the students that participated in this program, their attendance improved. And as of last month, it had improved long term. Now, we had some kiddos had slipped, but finding things like this that work, being innovative and just utilizing the people in your community that connect with your kiddos, because data has shown for years we have been failing our African American boys, especially. We had a report done that showed we are the #1 district for suspending Black males. And that's awful, and it's not okay. And we don't have the tools or the systems in place to support that group of students. And so when we find something like this that is working, we want to grow it. I wish we could make 3 or 4 or 5 or 20. Kevin Bracey is his name. Kevin Bracey's to come and do this. And so we're working on it. We can't clone him, but we're working on finding other people, but just thinking outside of the box. And that was a huge bright spot for me. And something that I think worked, and we've gotten a lot of positive feedback.
It's great. We have we have a comment from Janaea, who said she loves the idea of inviting motivational speakers to share with the students. It works. And from what you said, it definitely does. And then we have another question from Arcelia Gonzalez, and she says, as far as I understand, the PTHV model is mostly intended to build relationships rather than focusing on attendance. How do you bring up the attendance part during home visits? What's the approach?
So that's, yeah, that you have to be super careful. So parent teacher home visit is absolutely a tier 1, I don't even want to call it intervention, a tier 1 strategy, because you cannot, based on their model, target specific groups of students. So if, depending on the teacher, whoever is doing these home visits, if they can work it in, fine, but we don't want to push that, because they have something that's working and growing, and they don't even have to talk about attendance. It's building that relationship. I remember talking to Hetty and Cecilia, and they had evidence and research that showed that classrooms that had higher numbers of students who were participating in the parent-teacher home visit program had the lowest chronic absence rate. So not only did it impact the students who were receiving the visits, it impacted the other students in the class as well, right? And it makes sense. If people just go to class and you know that it'll be obvious if you don't go, then you tend to go, or you just like to be around the kids who have good relationships with their teachers, so that it just expands. Parent-teacher home visit is a very great program. It cannot focus specifically on attendance, but it does impact attendance. So.
Thank you. And then we have a comment from Eric Brooks, who said, thank you for sharing the mentorship story. People in our communities need other people. Thank you, Mr. Bracey. And then well done by all of you to capitalize on that. So sharing all the shout outs in the Q&A. We have 3 more minutes. There's time for one more question if anyone wanted to drop it in.
Can we ask them? Like, I'm just curious what they're doing. If they're seeing the same thing, are they looking at 50% chronic absence rates right now? And how are they looking to make this change, right? Because if the research is correct, that means 50% of our kids, are more likely to drop out. And these are things that we don't want to happen.
We don't have any, I know our chat, I could see if we can.
No, it's fine. Maybe they don't have 50% chronic absence rate. And then I really want to know what you're doing. Please tell
me. Someone also asked, how will we get the recording? And so we will be sending out an email tomorrow that includes the recording, so you could share it with any of your colleagues who maybe were not able to join or rewatch it again. And then also we'll be sharing that folder with all the resources that Jennifer mentioned, and that also has the slide deck within the folder.
I can share. There was this a news segment that we did on finding the lost students. I hate to call them lost students. It sounds like Peter Pan or something. But I really liked it, and just because it really focused on the work that we did, and it was at that time. So I, have forgotten a lot since then, and I can just drop it in the chat if you guys are bored and want to look at that. So.
Great. That would be great. And I think we are at time. Just want to say thank you so much, Jennifer and Nikki, for taking time to share all of your strategies and what you're doing. And thank you everyone here who spent time with us this afternoon.